back to the Custom Built and Screwed podcast, episode 5, where custom homes meet custom red tape and every government promise comes with a stop work order. Today, we're talking about Vancouver's bold plan to densify the city and then halt its own projects with stop work orders. You can't make this stuff up. It's like telling a whole city to bake cookies, then banning ovens for being too close to electrical hazards. We're gonna dive deep into names, timelines, contradictions, and exactly how not to run a city if you want housing to exist. So let's get into it. Here's a quick hit of what's happening in the news today. Bank of Canada still holding rates, but there's growing pressure to cut. Everyone is definitely on edge. Mortgage delinquencies are on the rise. They're still not ridiculously high. They're just on the rise from previous times where there were like almost zero mortgage delinquencies. So, take that with a bit of a grain of salt. Housing is still not really affordable, and for some people, it's now becoming unpayable, with a growing chunk of people not being able to pay their mortgages. As far as the housing market split goes, detached homes are still holding fairly steadily price-wise, but multiplexes and condos are stalling, and in Vancouver and Ontario, really stalling. Vancouver has issued stop work orders on at least 9 multiplex projects. Why? Because they were built too close to overhead BC Hydro power lines. Like you couldn't have predicted that. The city has declared them a serious safety risk. Just for extra dysfunction, WorkSafe BC swooped in and added their own stop work orders to 3 of those same sites. So that's 2 levels of government tag teaming your foundation pour. This is coming months after Mayor Ken Sim and Corey O'Kell, who's the general manager of development buildings and licensing, stood at the podium and promised that multiplex permitting would now be twice as fast. In October 24, they launched a combined development and building permit system specifically to speed this up. Well, spoiler alert, it ain't going that well. I think it's really important to take a minute here and just kind of go back and think about what is happening. It is so easy for all of these government officials and bureaucrats, truthfully, to be looking and seeing what's going on out there and what can or can't be done. And they're not talking to the people who are the boots on the ground. Like I saw a comment somewhere where it's like, well, it's amazing when, you have people that are carrying clipboards, not talking to the people that are carrying the shovels. And that is so true. I have been a part of council meetings where I have seen staffers tell mayor and council how they've had all of this industry input and they've gone out and spoken to people and they've got all of this information back and But when they're pressed on the names of the people to whom they spoke, it seems that they often come up with few details as to who they actually spoke to. I think mayor and council are being hoodwinked by a lot of the bureaucrats working in the city of Vancouver, certainly the district of North Vancouver and the city of North Vancouver. Mayor and council across the Lower Mainland needs to start asking a lot more questions and a lot more why, who, how, when. I'm a member of the Home Builders Association of Vancouver, Haven. Don't get me started on that name, but whatever. It used to be the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association, and then somebody in their infinite wisdom decided to change the name. Needless to say, I made a bit of a stink about it, but it still is what it is. I digress a little bit there. As a member of that, and I'm on the Government Relations Committee for Haven, we are frequently asked by the government to offer our opinion on upcoming bylaw changes or process or policy changes. And we're given like 2 business days prior to the mayor and council meeting or anything like that to provide our feedback. I mean, it is gaslighting to a whole nother level. 2 business days, we're all busy professionals. We're out managing our team, managing our projects, meeting with clients. 2 business days to read through a potential bylaw change or a policy change and understand it and then prepare comment back to staff. You got to be freaking kidding me. It's ridiculous. How about 2 weeks or even a month? We can get together as a business group and offer our feedback. But here's the thing, guys. They don't want our feedback, right? That's the problem. Our feedback, the reality of what the ramifications are of these policy changes, they don't want to hear. And they don't want to hear it because it's going to I'm going to say 95 times in 100 be contrary to the policy or the thing that they're trying to push forward. Again, mayor, council, you guys gotta ask more questions. Who, how, when, why? It's not happening. I'm telling you, as much as you're being told that it's happening, it is not. And it is a massive point of frustration with all of the members of Haven that I've spoken to and all of the other contractors that I talk to all the time, who they never get asked anything anyways. It's just we got to deal with the new set of rules. So we need to start asking more questions. And now, let's really start to dig into this city of Vancouver densification and, how it's really failed itself. So, back in October of 2023, Vancouver rezoned most of the single family lots under a new R1-1 zoning, which allowed up to 6 units per lot or 8 if they were rental. Now, that was part of the province's big swing with Bill 44, which was pushed by our beloved Premier, David Eby, genius, forcing cities across BC to accept multiplex and small-scale multi-unit housing. At the time, internal staff reports flagged some big risks. We were worried about tree loss, overloaded utilities. I talk about this a lot. Parking pressure. I mean, who needs cars anymore? We're just going to ride bikes, right? And then heritage building conflicts. But council pushed it through because saying no to housing is politically radioactive right now. So here we are. Projects have gone forward. Builders have pulled permits and invested their own money and or other investors' money. People's money is at stake here. This cannot be understated. And now the city of Vancouver is slapping stop work orders on projects because nobody bothered to think about where the freaking hydro lines are. We need to get out from behind our desk and have staff go to site, look around, take some pictures. It's not that deep, as my teenage kids would say. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of oversight. And I mean, let's see if I can remember later on here to talk about just the lack of actual available power for the electrification that the city of Vancouver has been forcing down people's throats for the last 5 years. And now other jurisdictions are starting to do similar things. Like recently, the District of North Van pushed through that every new single family home needs to have an EV plug in it. Well, we can talk about why that's a big deal and why it shouldn't be a force. It should just be an option. And maybe there's a carrot for doing it, but forcing it, just dumb. Just dumb. All right, so Vancouver's own Reddit thread said it best. This is what happens when the people with clipboards don't coordinate with the people with the shovels. I mean, you look at the population growth that we've had in Canada, but let's just not worry about Canada. Let's just worry about Vancouver. I live on the North Shore. Let's just worry about the North Shore to keep it a simple problem. Should there not be some form of legislation that dictates how many swimming lanes there are per capita, how many hospital beds there are per capita, how many general practitioner doctors there are per capita, how many schools or classrooms there are per capita, how many gallons of water in the reservoir, how about our sewage treatment plant? If you live in Vancouver, I know you love traffic. It's an ongoing battle. And my point being is our beloved government officials from the municipal to the provincial to the federal level keep throwing more people into the fray, but there is no legislation. There are no guidelines. There's no nothing, to the best of my knowledge. So feel free to comment below and tell me I'm wrong, where it says, well, if you're going to have this many people, then you need to increase your highways from 6 lanes to 8 lanes, or from 4 to 6, or whatever the case may be. You're going to need to have X number of additional hospital beds. I mean, for the love of everything holy, Lower Lonsdale has become one of the least accessible places in all of Vancouver because there's nowhere to frickin' park a car. Now, I know everybody thinks that, hey, we can ride our unicorns down to Lonsdale Quay and hang out and have a good time. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. I mean, they want us riding our bikes. But guess what it does in Vancouver frequently? it rains. And unless you have an e-bike, I mean, I trust me, I get that I could definitely use a little bit more exercise myself, but the North Shore and Vancouver in general is a pretty hilly area. Maybe when you get out to the valley and where things are a little bit flatter, bikes make a little bit more sense. But then again, you're now dealing with people that maybe they have bikes, but they have trucks because they got to pull their farm equipment. They got to bring their crops to the store, whatever the case may be, right? Let's just be intelligent about how we're doing this stuff. And so again, do we have enough parking? I am going to say full stop. There is not enough parking in Lonsdale Quay. The number of nights where my wife and I have tried to go down to go and have dinner, and then we go into the underground park, and I mean, fine to pay, never mind free parking, like we go straight for the pay parking, and it's all full. There's nowhere to park, so we just leave. And I'm more or less given up on Lonsdale Quay as a place for me to go. I mean, it's a great spot if you're living down there, if you're kind of like below Grand Boulevard. No, if you're below Keith Road, not that long a walk down to Lonsdale Quay. And I mean, it's awesome. There's lots of great shops and things to do down there. But if you don't live nearby, it's a really difficult place to get to. So we need to see some guidelines as to what happens when we're increasing our density and our population. And I mean this, how do you miss on the permits? How do you issue a building permit and not acknowledge or recognize where the hydro lines are? It's mind blowing. Mind blowing. Getting back to the Vancouver densification and talking about what's going on in the city of Vancouver, and now it's starting to make its way to the North Shore, is when we go and we electrify our homes and we say we can no longer have any gas appliances, so we can't heat our house with natural gas, we can't cook with natural gas, everything has to be electric. There is insufficient hydro infrastructure throughout Vancouver. Like the wires, like the hydro wires aren't big enough. Now, I understand that they're starting to update some transformers and they're looking at making some changes to that. I also understand that there are some people, and I believe I've talked about it in this podcast before, where, neighborhoods are having to install like basically a 10-foot by 10-foot pad and plunking a transformer on there. By the way, that 10-foot by 10-foot pad would have otherwise made a perfectly awesome off-street parking spot. Just saying. We're now having to pay $50,000, $80,000 for a hydro transformer so that the city block will have enough power. Because when you're upgrading, a lot of the older homes in BC only have 100 amp panels. Every new home that we've built in the last 10 years and that most people build have a minimum 200 amp panel. But with the additional electrification that is being demanding, and this is where I'm now going to circle back to the district of North Van saying that we need to have EV chargers in homes. Well, that EV charging circuit can be the straw that breaks the camel's back and says, now you need to go from a 200 amp service to a 400 amp service. I believe Hydro is working on a lower service amount so that you don't have to go all the way up to 400 amps. But, it sounds, not a big deal to go from 200 to 400. I don't think people understand like how big a deal it is. Like when you are changing your electrical service from 200 to 400 amps, we're talking about months of time in approval with BC Hydro, and then tens of thousands of dollars in cost from the electrician and from BC Hydro. It is anything but inexpensive to upgrade your service to that magnitude. Going from a 100 amp service to a 200 amp service, depending on where wires are and whatever else, maybe you're going to be $7,000 to $8,000. I mean, it could be more than that if there's other peripheral work that has to get done to accommodate the work. It's not a mind-boggling, overwhelming sort of project to get from 100 amps to 200 amps. I can tell you, and I have firsthand experience, I've done it twice. Going from 200 to 400, we are dealing in months of approvals. And I think the last time we did it, it was $30,000 from BC Hydro for upgrading the service to the house. And then I believe, and this was 3 years ago for that one, my PMs deal with the newer stuff and I don't have the numbers handy. Anyways, it was 30 grand to get hydro to the house. And then I think the electrician was another 12 to 20, somewhere in there, to go from 200 to 400 amps. We need to move forward cautiously. And I think putting all of our eggs in the hydro basket, it just doesn't make sense. And it certainly doesn't make sense when there is no written plan or commitment from BC Hydro or the government to upgrade all of the hydro lines throughout the province so we have enough power in the grid to accommodate these power increases. The moral of the story is we have bureaucrats in government raising the bar of what they expect from everybody else, the bar for what they need to do in order for us to be up here moves at an absolute snail's pace. And I mean, if I were one of these developers, or I mean, I'm not sure, it could be homeowners as well. It could be somebody like you watching this video right now that went out and were like, well, I own a home and I don't need this much house, and I sure would like to, develop 6 homes where there is just one right now. It seems like a good idea. And so you now go and you put all of this risk out there, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars at risk, and you go through all of the process, all of the hoops, and there are a lot of hoops. I mean, there is no doubt there's a lot of hoops. You get a stop work order slapped on you because you're doing what your permit has told you you're allowed to do. Not a good look. To be fair, we're not the only ones building through this madness. James Livingstone, he's a managing partner at Lightwell Homes, says they have 14 multiplexes underway in Vancouver. Suraj Jutney from from Theorem Development, he says the space is still new and builders are learning the ropes. Bryn Davidson from Lane Fab reminds us that heritage overlays and retention options make certain lots far more complicated than others. The other snippet and the other bit in the news that has come out, and I think it's really important for us to talk about, a 5-year-long lawsuit that was before the courts that was brought forward by the Cowichan Nation looking to challenge ownership rights of a series of business properties and over 100 residential properties in Richmond. And so after a 5-year-long battle, the justice decided that the Cowichan Nation had title rights to these properties, and it looks like they've given a year and a half for other bits and bobs to get figured out and sorted out. But I think it's really important for everybody watching this video and for everybody out there to be talking about, things like this, like property rights. I personally have worked pretty hard to have what I have. And I suspect if you're a homeowner living wherever you're living, your home isn't a gift. It's something that you busted your hump for, and you're probably really proud of it, and you're probably really happy that you have it. And for a judge to 150 years after the fact reverse the title ownership of your property. I mean, if this ruling stands, this could have some pretty far-reaching results in this country. So I definitely think it's something that we need to be talking more of, making sure that we're all aware of what's going on there. Now, I mean, again, I don't think the ruling it's not as simple as like, oh, well, the title is just going to flip over. I get it. Don't yell at me in the comments. The people that are the owners of that home now had no part in how the first 100 or more years of their property being a property ID with the city of Richmond. If we can't make sure that property owners have confidence that they are going to remain the owner of their property, that is going to have some massively drastic ramifications to our housing market and to how secure everybody feels in this province and in this country. What's done is done, and let's move forward. I personally think we need to stop looking in the rearview mirror, especially things that are 100 years or older. I mean, if it hasn't been an issue for the last 100 or more years, not sure why all of a sudden today it's an issue. And certainly, that land wouldn't be worth what it is if people hadn't come through and added all of the infrastructure and development to that area, right? I mean, you could have you saw it there. I mean, there's a great example of this. There was a fellow in the United States that bought, I can't remember what it was, but let's call it was like 100 acres of desert. And he got it for, I don't know, 50 grand or 100 grand. I mean, it's just desert. Nobody wanted it. Well, he had a thought in his mind. And so he invested a whole lot of money into actually he brought in excavators and he dug a very, 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 very large hole and filled it with water and created a lake. Well, guess what? Now he's got a whole community living around this lake. And so now there's infrastructure that supports that and whatever else. And so my point being is like the sand was sand. And until somebody else came in and invested a whole bunch of money, very low in value. So what's happened has happened. And I really would hope that what our goal as a society is to move forward. Stop looking backwards and just move forwards. Where are we going? What do we want to, how do we want to be living? Let's be positive and not punitive. How about that? Some final thoughts here. Vancouver wants to densify. The province is forcing its hand, but policy without execution is just a press release. If you're listening to this and planning your own multiplex, here's a checklist. Definitely pull up BC Hydro on a map and know your setback rules. Do not trust the city to flag this issue for you. Maybe hire someone who plays 4D chess with red tape. I don't know many designers or architects that are gonna be able to catch all of these issues that are coming up. And again, the building code and the bylaws, everything has become so insanely complicated. It sure would be fun to have some of these things simplified. That's pretty much it for me for today. This has been episode 5 of Custom Built and Screwed. Hit subscribe, share it with your overregulated builder friends or anybody else that you might think and will enjoy it. And if you've ever been hit with a stop work order from one agency while following instructions from another, pour yourself a stiff one. In the meantime, stay custom built, stay slightly screwed. Thanks for watching and stay awesome. Bye now.